so much more that we didn't know about outside of just Roe v. Wade out there, and it doesn't get talked about because it's controversial.
So glad this is not turning into mansplaining.
I try.
No offense, but we don't need any more podcasts with just men talking.
I am trying so hard to avoid it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Social Discord, episode 30, Abortion and Roe v. Wade, the Conservative White Whale, Part 2. I'm your host, Dalen Turk.
I'm Kara Tebow.
And I'm Curtis Medina.
So going into Part 2 of our abortion series, like I said, coming out of Part 1, we're going to be talking a little bit more about what's going on in today's world, and Curtis is actually going to tell us about an absolutely fascinating study and give us a little more insight on some statistics surrounding abortion and those who have experienced such a procedure. But before we get into that, Karen, Curtis, how are we feeling about this? You know, we just got off of a deep dive into the history of abortion. How are we feeling right now?
I feel like we did a really good job of setting up an episode that's prepared to dive into the current political landscape. I feel like we went over the context, we went over the history, we kind of went over how we got here. Now I think we're ready to keep the conversation moving.
Yeah, and I thought it was such a great job by Kara. I'm so glad that you covered the bigger issues too. Like so often, when you're in social studies or whatever in high school or junior high or whatever, and you read about this, they talk about Roe v. Wade for about a paragraph and you move on because it's so controversial. So thank God that there are people who look into this, who care about it, who really deep dive into these issues and make sure that we understand the context so we can figure out how we got here and where we're going next.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I know we talked about before we started the last episode of just how in-depth the entire subject really is. And Curtis, that's actually an incredible point you said, is we look at the history books in junior high and high school and whatnot, we talk about Roe v. Wade, legalized abortion. That's about the extent of it, to be quite honest with you. It's about as far as it goes. And so, Kara, your research was just so phenomenal because I think, we said it opened up a perspective because there was so much more that we didn't know about outside of just Roe v. Wade that is just out there and it doesn't get talked about because it's controversial. That's basically
also, it. You have to actually look for that stuff. I mean, I don't think any of us knew half of the things we read. So who really has the time to dig into all of this? So that's why I'm glad we're doing this episode because, it did take hours and hours and hours of research to get to even just that hour and a half episode. So really our goal, of course, is to continue doing the research so that we can bring it in a way that's much more digestible because it is important.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be hard to access.
And it's still so taboo. I mean, we think of ourselves as such a modernized society, but, I have to admit, I was out at a sandwich shop and I was kind of hiding the title from people because I didn't even want to have that conversation with people that I didn't know was on board, with even talking about, abortion. A lot of people, you mention it and they're pointing at you, yelling about, killing babies and stuff. And it's like, wow, that is not what we're talking about here. There is a much bigger issue to be talked about. So, I'm excited about this episode.
And so with that, Curtis, why don't you go ahead and just take us into it?
So we called these episodes the conservative white whale. And usually if you call something somebody's white whale, you're basically saying it's something that they have been targeting their whole life. They become absolutely obsessed with, but they just can't quite kill. And that is definitely the issue with conservatives. I kind of joke that this issue is to conservatives as gun laws are to liberals. Just can't quite do it because it's, the opinion doesn't let you do it. Doesn't get you very far. You at the best you can do is kind of end up at a stalemate and hope that society gets better on its own, I guess. So trying to attack this and figure out why conservatives are so obsessed with overturning it. It gets back to a lot of ideas about religion and protecting life no matter what that life is, and when life begins and all that stuff. So from the beginning, when Roe v. Wade was passed, um, conservatives have vowed to destroy it, unequivocally wants to destroy it. And there have been very few attempts to find any kind of middle ground, because I think thinking is, if conservatives ever got their way with a middle ground, that do what they've always promised to do, and essentially make the law useless, that protects against, or protects having abortions, and we'd end up like we were in the past. So Reagan had a speech that I wanted to play a quick second of, that basically said we must never rest, and here it is.
More than a decade ago, a Supreme Court decision literally wiped off the books of 50 states statutes protecting the rights of unborn children. Abortion on demand now takes the lives of up to 1.5 million unborn children a year. Human life legislation ending this tragedy will someday pass the Congress, and you and I must never rest until it does.
Like many Republicans, he is absolutely adamant that abortion should be eliminated, and against it. One thing I thought was interesting was I found this thing called the Turnaway Study, and they based the idea for doing this on Reagan's Surgeon General at the time. This was the 1980s. He basically tasked the Surgeon General with finding conclusive evidence that about the effects of abortion on women physically, economically, and psychologically. And he came back after 2 years saying, I'm sorry, I can't really find enough information to give you a definitive answer. And that was kind of where it was left at that point, and for all this time until the Turnaway Study decided to answer that.
So wait,
and
all that
actually
time,
give politicians.
so all that
Yeah.
time we're debating abortion, and no one even really knows, or there's no definitive study saying, hey, look at this. This is what happens to women if they get an abortion. Like
It's basically mansplaining, like, abortion to women. It's completely unfounded talk from politicians that, had no basis in science or in any kind. I mean, very few studies and nothing really conclusive this whole time, until this Turnaway Study decided to say, okay, let's really ask these questions, like let's do it in a scientific way. So over the course of 5 years, the study concluded in 2016. 7,800 interviews were done, 1,000 women, and they specifically chose women who either had gotten an abortion or had been refused an abortion right at the cutoff time. So the cutoff time typically is, I believe it's Viability, but it's essentially around the end of the semester.
Mm-hmm.
But and it varies from state to state as well. But they wanted to specifically have women who wanted an abortion at first, but either were denied or given one. And the difference is between that and other things that had been studied was other studies included women who were just happy to be pregnant, did not want an abortion, and never thought about it. This study was more likely to have women who were more in poverty, who were more people of color, basically had more circumstances that would lead them to even consider seriously getting an abortion, enough to literally ask for it. And the ramifications of being denied that, if once you are sure that you want one. So and today in this country, there still is quite a few limitations that are dictated by states for women getting abortions. It's not a complete free-for-all like some conservatives say it is. So in the study, the participants resembled closely the makeup of women who get abortions nationally. Between 1 in 3 and 1 in 4 women will have an abortion during their lifetime. So this is not just a fringe selection of women. This is people you know. These are women that you know that about 25 to 33% of the women you know are affected by this directly because they will have had an abortion sometime in their lifetime.
Do either of you know anybody who's had an abortion?
I do.
I do, yeah, I do as well. It's that the 1 in 3 to 1 in 4 statistic just makes it so much more real. But like, yeah, I actually just learned one of my best friends. I just learned the other day that she had an abortion, and I had no idea until she told me. And she did it like 2 years ago.
I have many friends who have had an abortion, like more than you like said, you'd think. And one thing that I want to point out, and of course this is anecdotal to me, but this is a broader conversation that I hear with abortions, is that none of my friends are bothered by it. Like, maybe like I have maybe one friend, and that was because it was actually traumatic. Ectopic pregnancy, which is extraordinarily dangerous, and she was, it's very traumatic. But it's not like my friends who had abortions are traumatized by it or they think about it all the time. Like, they had it and it's okay and they're okay. So like, it's okay to recognize that abortions don't mean, psychological damage forever. Sometimes they just mean, okay, well, I wasn't ready for that. Go in and get it done, move on. And I think that's really important to remember, that sometimes
Absolutely.
It's easy for some women to get an abortion.
Right.
That's a good point. And I think increasingly organizations like Planned Parenthood are trying to, really take away that stigma of it being such a negative thing and trying to push it more toward the idea of family planning and of a routine procedure.
Right.
For those who have abortions, 90% of which occur in the first 3 months, the first trimester, only about 1% of all abortions happen after 20 weeks, which is 5 months or late second trimester.
1%.
Yeah. And that is what you hear about, I'd say 90% of the time.
Yes. Okay. That's why I was confirming, because that is the argument.
I do wonder
Right.
what percentage of that 1% are due to the fact that either the mother will die or the child and the mother will die.
It's actually on here. I'm not sure if it's specifically that, if it's just people in the later or not. I don't see it here, but I think I read in one of the books that it was about 10% of the abortions were specifically like health-related reasons of either the baby or the mother, or attributed to things like rape and incest. So it still is, majority of people in that 1% are still doing it because they're not thinking it's the right decision for personal reasons, not necessarily health reasons.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay.
And let's see. And basically what we were just saying, this book was talking about how that women who choose to get later abortions are the most politically vulnerable and least socially accepted. So, so these are the people you hear about the most, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they should be vilified for making this decision. It gets more difficult, more dangerous the later you go to get an abortion. A lot of cases, it is very difficult for them if they do it later, like you were saying, Kara, your one friend. It can be emotionally scarring and dangerous, but it doesn't have to be. It just depends on your specific situation. A lot of women don't even know for quite a bit of time, and a later abortion is their only option, because by the time they get the money together, they get to, they drive the 250 miles to the nearest abortion clinic because their state has decided to block it all. They're already pretty late in the process, and some states don't allow later abortion, as we'll get into. So basically, the idea of viability is based on something called gestational limit. The process of being carried in the womb through what would be an eventual birth is a gestational age. One thing I thought was surprising, that I think probably all women know, Kara, but me as a dude, like, was totally stupid about, was they base gestational age, which is taken from the beginning of the woman's last menstrual period. Excuse me.
Yeah.
And to me, that seems like, I mean, I get why they do it, but that seems like really early, because as a woman, you may not notice or even like care so much that you missed your period for several more weeks after that. And yet you're already like 4 weeks into pregnancy.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we've heard a lot in Texas, is that this idea that women have any idea that they're pregnant is absurd. It is so common for women's menstrual cycle to be all over the place. It is actually like kind of abnormal, not abnormal, but it's not as common for like your menstrual cycle to be the same day of every day of every month. Stress can change it, medications can change it. Like, I'm sorry, but it is such an unfair standard to hold women to just know that their body's pregnant based off of their menstrual cycle, when those are, very, very personal and different for each woman.
Yeah, and I think my mom told me, I don't remember if it was with me or my older sister, but I think she said that the first time she took a pregnancy test, it came back negative. But like 2 weeks later or something, she was still feeling bad, and she was like, I'm gonna take it again. And it came back positive, being pregnant, and so like it doesn't even have to show up at first. I mean, it
Yeah.
can, it's not a full proof system.
Shelby was telling me with the traditional pregnancy test, pee on the stick, a false negative is much more common than a false positive.
Oh, wow.
Which I guess I didn't even think of that.
The reason that's the case is that the way pregnancy tests work is by detecting a certain hormone in your body. So in very, very rare circumstances, something can artificially produce this hormone. But if the pregnancy test is showing positive, it can't do that unless you have the hormone associated with pregnancy. But of course, for that, your body to generate enough to be caught, you have to be into your pregnancy, or every body has to work the same and produce the same amount of hormones. So yeah, it's not uncommon to get a negative test, because not every woman's body is producing these pregnancy hormones at the same increments.
Kara, I'm so happy you're on this show.
So glad this is not turning into mansplaining.
Thank you so much, but we don't need any more podcasts with just men talking.
I am trying so hard to avoid it.
Okay, so the statistics say the people who get abortions, just over a third are white, about a third are black, 21% Latina, 4% Native, 3% Asian, 60% are in their 20s, 18% are teenagers, 22% are 30 and over.
That's interesting.
Of women's, go ahead.
The 22% 30 and over. That's I don't know. I guess maybe I guess I would have thought that number would be lower, to be honest, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, people are having kids later in life now. I mean, it is safer to have kids later than it used to be. There's a lot more scientific advancements. People are waiting until they get married now when they didn't to. There's a lot that's changed in society.
So I feel like it has something to do with the older you get, and you don't have kids because it's a choice. Like, you're pretty set on that. Like, me and my partner, like, we're pretty positive that we don't want to have kids. So like, having a kid as I'm heading into my 30s would like, I mean, I would like fall into a depression.
Yeah.
No offense to, and that's just my personal choice. So I imagine as more women are understanding that it's acceptable not to have children in your late 20s and early 30s, whereas even like honestly, like 5 years ago, I think I would have been under the umbrella being like, you know what, I'm old enough, like I have a partner, I have a job, like I should just have the kid. And then like I kind of like started getting older and I started following honestly like more social media accounts that promote women being able to be childless, and my stance has completely changed. Whereas if I
Wow.
got pregnant now, I would go get an abortion because I would be like, no, actually I don't have to. Just because I have a job and a partner, all these things, like I don't have to. So I'd be really interested to know how that statistic has also changed over the last couple of
Yeah.
years, just giving women more autonomy over the way that they want their lives to play out.
And women aren't defining themselves as much by just being mothers necessarily. Like
Totally.
some do, but it's not like a necessity.
Yes, exactly. And you don't have to have a kid, if you don't want one. That's at least that's what
Hmm.
we're fighting for. That's what we want women to have the chance to do.
Interesting. According to this, 50% of women that are seeking abortions are in poverty. The later the abortion, the higher they are in poverty. 40% of which in the first trimester, 57% in the second trimester. 25% were middle class in wealth with private insurance. 61% were in a current romantic relationship with a person who had caused them to become pregnant. 60% had other children already, and 45% had a previous abortion.
Wow.
20% of women reported a history of sexual assault or rape. Not, I don't, one thing I didn't say was whether or not that pregnancy was a result of that, or if it was just at some point in their life. And
Right.
then 1% specifically, well, maybe this says it, 1% specifically were pregnant due to rape at the time. So maybe that does actually answer that. So the conclusion from the Turnaway study was quote, we find no evidence that abortion hurts women. For every outcome we analyzed, received an abortion were either the same or more frequently better off than women who were denied an abortion. These are people who wanted an abortion either way, but so in other words, once they've decided this is the way they want to go, the people who were denied were worse off in every way that they measured. Their physical health was better. I'm going back to their physical health was better. Their employment and financial situations were better. That's not surprising. Their mental health was initially better and eventually the same. They had more aspirational plans for the coming year. They had a greater chance of having a wanted pregnancy and being in a good romantic relationship years down the road. And the children they already had were better off too. And this is continuing the quote, we find many ways in which women were hurt by carrying an unwanted pregnancy to term. Continued pregnancy and childbirth is associated with large physical health risks, so great that 2 women in the study died from childbirth-related causes. So this was during the study. 2 of them actually died.
Wow.
Many others experienced complications from delivery and that extended over the next 5 years, which is where the study ended. Increased chronic head and joint pain, hypertension, poor self-rated overall health. In the short run, women experienced increased anxiety and loss of life satisfaction after being denied an abortion, which, I mean, that makes total sense. I mean, is anybody surprised by that?
No.
I mean, what a slap in the face, right? I mean, you say you want this, you say you need this, and you can't get it in the United States of America.
I said it in our last episode and I'll say it again. Pregnancy is an extremely intrusive and dangerous medical procedure. And it actually does. I mean, I know that people will call me dramatic, but to me it seems very barbaric for someone to go through such a high-risk procedure. And I really appreciate you pulling the statistics out, Curtis. This is great.
Well, thanks. Abortion. Another thing the book said: abortion opponents often accuse women seeking abortions of being misinformed, irresponsible, or immoral. Women, if they just understood it a little bit better, they would either choose not to have an abortion or they shouldn't even have the choice. Can't make that choice for themselves, right? But in fact, as the book says, the Turnaway study results make clear Women make thoughtful, well-considered decisions about whether to have an abortion. When asked why they want to end their pregnancy, women gave specific and personal reasons, and their fears are borne out in experiences of women who carry unwanted pregnancies to term. Women seeking abortions worry that they cannot afford to raise a baby, and we find that women denied abortions are more likely to live in poverty. They worry that their relationship isn't strong enough to support a child, and we find that relationships with the man involved dissolve regardless of whether they carry the pregnancy to term or have an abortion. I thought that was really interesting because, like there's a lot of people who say that, women stay in relationships that are bad for them because there's a baby involved or something like that. Or they think having a baby will result in a longer lasting relationship, or they'll get closer to their husband or whatever. And I think that's terrible advice. Like, according to this study, the relationship dissolved either way.
It's very common with religious people. Like, I know a lot of my
Yep.
my Mormon friends, God bless them, when I have three I can think of that were struggling in their marriage, and they said, well, maybe I think having this baby will fix it. I'm like, actually, no. Having a child does not fix relationships. So ladies, please, 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 please don't think that having a baby will fix your relationship. Anyway.
Absolutely. They also found that no mental health harm came from having an abortion in the long term, but they did find some short-term increases in symptoms of anxiety and esteem among women who were denied abortion.
I mean, I think that's
Let's
fair.
see, anything else? Yeah.
It's so, 'cause, like, you're reading through this, and it just seems like common sense. It makes
Logical.
sense, you know? Like, this is
Yeah.
exactly what I would expect them to find.
Yeah. And this was a huge study. I mean, 1,000 women, 5 years, thousands of interviews, and specifically with women that were already getting an abortion and were either denied or not. Like, that is exactly the kind of study you want politicians to be reading when they're making these laws, because these are the people they're actually affecting. I don't know if I have it in here or not, but that I thought was great. In one of the books I was reading, I can't remember which one it was, that said that there was a conservative politician that was talking about anti-abortion legislation, and the woman that was interviewing said, "Why do you think women want to get an abortion?" And he paused and he said, "I've never thought about that." It's insane.
Yeah, it's insane, but then also, like, Dalen, you said this all seems like common sense, and like everything you're saying aligns with what I know anecdotally, with what I hear my friends and women saying. So it is kind of crazy that, this is so pervasive. This is anecdotal experiences. This is statistical experiences. But then for some reason, it's just like, pass. Let's move on. Like, what?
Well, and women are so rarely included in the discussion as well. In one study at the University of California, Berkeley, researchers looked at 2 years worth of news articles and found that only 32 of the 783 articles published about abortion, which is only 4%, 32 out of the 783 actually referred to a real life woman who experienced an unwanted pregnancy.
Wow.
Like, pointed out that there's always the article or the picture that goes with it, like a headless torso, like pregnant woman, that is, it goes along with it. And it's like, but they're not including the face of the woman. It's just like the stock image.
It's not about women. I mean, it's not about what they want. Like, that's what I feel like everything I read is just confirming these things that I have felt and that I have seen. Like, it is not about what women want or why they want an abortion. It's about making sure that there is control over what they do with this fetus, this baby. Like, everything that you're saying is just further like instilling this belief in me that it's never been about why women want them.
Well, and so much of it now, when you look at the religious fanatics who use the Bible to back up their pro-life scheme, it's not, like I said, I mean, it's not about women. It's not about abortion. It's just about religion. It's about their belief. It's about their faith. It's about
Belief, yeah.
Christianity.
Well,
It's
and
not
and
about the
to be fair though, a lot of people are pro-life because they see no difference in a baby and a fetus. I mean, and so like they consider this idea of weighing a woman's right versus the life of a potential baby. And so it's not just religious, but it is a
Mhm.
deeply moral belief.
I guess for me, that argument falls flat from, and this is not all people, but when I hear this argument from people, I usually don't see those same people advocating for what happens after that child's born. Are
Yeah.
you guys like, are you advocating for financial safety nets, for school lunches, for therapy, for healthcare, are you advocating for the foster system to be overhauled? Are you advocating to remove restrictions from adoptions that make it difficult for people to adopt, for gay couples to adopt? Like, you keep, I keep hearing this not you, Curtis, like I keep hearing this argument from
Hmm.
people who are, um, pro-life, even though I don't like that because we're all pro-life, right?
Yeah.
But
Anti-abortion. I think that makes more
yeah,
sense. Yeah.
anti-abortion, but you only care as long as the baby's born, and then it's like, okay, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. So to me, that's not pro-life. That's pro-birth.
Yeah.
Because if you don't really care what happens
Yeah,
afterwards, then you're
it's
not
true.
pro-life. So
Hmm.
I would love someone to flush that argument out with, and honestly, maybe it would be interesting for us to chat with someone too who is anti-abortion to hear what their thoughts are on that,
Mhm.
because you can't have it both ways.
Well, I
You
would
know,
like to pose the question of, okay, so if a fetus is alive, a fetus is a person, a fetus is living, then can the mother draw health insurance for that fetus? Can the mother cover that baby under life insurance? And if that baby does die by carrying out the pregnancy, can the mother uh, uh, pull that life insurance policy?
Or
You
child
know,
I mean,
support. Or
I
child
mean,
support while she's pregnant.
legally, you're not a person until you're born. That because it's the most obvious moment that you are a person. You are separated from the mother, and you have viability, right?
yeah,
I think there is some argument that if a baby is viable before that, they could be, I don't know, closer to being a person. So like, I get why people are creeped out by late term abortions, which are not a big
Yeah.
part of this debate, by the way. It's the absolute extremist part
yeah.
of this debate. But like, I get why people don't like those. But ultimately, it has to be the choice of the mother.
An argument that I hear in relation to this a lot is that there are no mandated medical procedures aside from pregnancy and giving birth if abortion's illegal. So like there is currently nothing that exists to mandate that you have to go through the medical
Hmm.
procedure aside from
Hmm.
pregnancy, which is very
That's
dangerous.
interesting. It's very interesting. I mean, and I think men need to understand that idea of bodily autonomy a little bit more because there is nothing that forces a man to make that decision.
Nothing.
And indeed, quite a few people, I think, put in that place would not want that to happen. And you legally could not make them, and yet with pregnancy you can. So let me wrap this up. So I know we have to get to the more interesting part of this episode and all the legalese. But just to wrap up what this study was talking about, 40% of the women who were seeking abortions said that they had more than one reason for seeking the abortion. The top reason, though, was 40% was not financially prepared. 36% was said that not the right time for the baby to have a baby. 31% said partner-related reasons. 29% needs to focus on other children. 20% interferes with future opportunities. Other reasons were mentally preparedness, health-related reasons, um, and that they wanted a better life for the baby, the children that they already had, and they didn't think they could give a good life to their current children. And like I said, most women had more than one reason. I believe it was like 60% or something like that. So that study was just I thought that was a really interesting study. It just finished in 2016. It's just now becoming part of the national conversation
Wow.
on abortion, and they found absolutely no bearing that it's bad for women. So things like Roe v. Wade do seem to stand up to scrutiny. But an important thing to mention is that Roe v. Wade is not absolute, and that it specifically gave states the right to limit, I think, as kind of a ways to not completely sideline people who are against abortion, and they didn't want to get it necessarily in their minds out of control. So they gave states the rights to limit it. However, it was not meant to be limited so much that it became overly burdensome, and that is what we're going to be talking about. Coming up. So Dalen, I know you went into a lot of that. What did you find?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what you said. I mean, we were debating what the role of the Supreme Court is in this instance, and I think what we kind of decided was their purpose in Roe v. Wade was to decide the constitutionality of abortion, and then they left pretty much everything else up to the states to hash out the real like nitty gritty surrounding it. And so I wanted to look more into what's happening today legally, what the legal landscape looks like, what laws we're facing. So looking back at 2021, and this is from the Law Journal for Social Justice. As of September 2021, there were nearly 600 anti-abortion laws introduced in 2021. By August 2021, 97 of them were enacted into law. And Kara Curtis, I know I asked y'all this to take a guess. How many anti-abortion laws have been enacted since Roe v. Wade?
I'm gonna say 400.
See, I want to say an astronomical number because I just feel like, I mean, that was in the early 70s. Like, I feel like a few hundred per year or something like that, like, makes sense. But yeah, like I think Kara mentioned earlier, like about Price is Right rules. Like I want to say 401.
401.
Just to make sure that I win. But no, my serious guess is 1,200.
So since Roe v. Wade, 1973, there have been 1,327. 1,327 anti-abortion laws have been enacted in the United States since Roe v. Wade. And so I think a lot of people struggle to grasp what these really are, because you think anti-abortion and you think, oh, it bans abortion at X amount of weeks. But there's just so much more that actually goes beyond that in terms of restriction and just what can be done surrounding abortion procedures and abortion care. So here's kind of a range of the different types of laws that have been enacted and put in place. So Curtis, you talked about gestational period. So that's gestational bans, basically banning abortion after certain points in pregnancy. And then there's method bans, which ban particular methods of abortion care. Parental involvement laws. These require parental consent or notification of abortion care or judicial approval for minors seeking abortion care. There's reason bans, which these restrict abortion if the pregnant person's decision is based on, and the pregnant woman's decision is based on a fetus's sex, race, or fetal diagnosis. Trigger bans, trigger bans are interesting. So trigger bans, and I think we mentioned it in the last episode, are laws put into place in states to immediately ban abortion if Roe v. Wade is overturned. And I want to clarify, these are separate. You'll see, I know we mentioned that there are however many states it was where they have pre-Roe v. Wade anti-abortion laws that are still in place. And so if Roe v. Wade is overturned, those will be the law by default, whereas trigger bans make it so that is law. So they don't have that already, but these make it so that once it happens, then it becomes law.
So like if Roe v. Wade is ever overturned, some state is going to have a law where, like, if a woman be bigger than 4 chickens, then she cannot get an abortion. I mean, it's
Yeah.
going to be something just like medieval.
Whatever it may be, it will be something from, that is just to the core anti-abortion.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And then
How
you look
scary.
at targeted restriction of abortion providers, TRAP laws. These single out medical practitioners, they single out the medical practices of doctors who provide abortions and impose on them requirements that are more burdensome than those imposed on other medical practices. So,
Wow.
I mean, yeah, they basically just put this huge burden on doctors who provide abortion care. And then you have coverage restrictions, which these limit public and or private insurance coverage of abortion care and restrict public funding for abortion. And this is a huge detriment to organizations like Planned Parenthood. So of the 97 laws that were enacted in 2021, 12 fall under the category of abortion bans. And I'm just going to go over a few of them here. We have Arkansas Act 308. This prohibits abortion except when the mother's life is endangered. And that was actually blocked by a federal judge. We have Oklahoma House Bill 2441. It's a heartbeat bill. You can't have an abortion as soon as a fetal heartbeat is detected. This was blocked by the state Supreme Court in Oklahoma. You have Oklahoma Senate Bill 918, which is a TRAP law. You have Idaho House Bill 366, which is another heartbeat bill. These in 2021, heartbeat bills were kind of the go-to, I guess, in terms of anti-abortion, or specifically abortion ban laws that states were trying to enact. Then you have Mississippi HB 1510. This bans abortions after 15 weeks except for medical emergency or severe fetal abnormality. This does not allow an exception for rape or incest. This is one that both the Mississippi, the 15-week bill, as well as, we'll talk in a second, Texas SB 8 were the two that kind of swept the nation near the end of 2021. You had Texas that came out with their abortion ban law that would ban abortion after 6 weeks. It's the severe and strict anti-abortion bill yet, and then Mississippi came out with their 15-week ban, and I'm correct in saying that the Mississippi bill was upheld by the Supreme Court, right?
I never researched that one, so I'm not sure.
Like I'm fair. It was I guess I didn't see what like the final decision was, but I mean, yeah, it was upheld by the Supreme Court, providing Mississippi with a bill that bans abortion after 15 weeks, which leads us to Texas Senate Bill 8, the most restrictive anti-abortion bill ever. It bans abortion after 6 weeks with exceptions for mother's health and severe fetal abnormalities. Once again, no exception for rape or incest. It's interesting to note this is 18 weeks less than the Roe v. Wade precedent.
Wow.
But the groundbreaking thing that SB 8 does is how it's enforced. So Texas SB 8 explicitly bans state officials from enforcing the law itself. Instead, it empowers private citizens to sue for at least $10,000 anyone who aids and abets an abortion after the detection of a fetal heartbeat, usually around 6 weeks or so into gestation. Women who obtain abortions cannot be sued. So, if Kara wanted an abortion and I were to help her drive to another state to get that abortion, and like a Texas citizen was aware that I helped her do that, they could sue me for $10,000 for helping Kara drive across the state to get an abortion.
See, that can't be constitutional. That just can't. I mean,
Well,
when states are working against each other, like if it's legal in another state, like what right does Texas have that you can be sued? Like what's next? Like, a state suing that if you drive somebody to Nevada to gamble, their gambling laws, like that's ridiculous.
I'm pretty sure it was upheld, at least by most of our courts.
So
And
originally, the Supreme Court. So I mean, it's been upheld thus far. The Supreme Court did not take up the hearing, or the Supreme Court did not stop the bill from being enacted, and that's when they took up the Mississippi bill. But the Supreme Court did decide that the lower federal courts could, because right now there's just lawsuits up the wazoo against a whole lot of people in Texas trying to fight this bill, and the Supreme Court did rule that that the suit could continue in the lower courts, but the Supreme Court also said during this time it wouldn't halt it, so it's still being enacted. Thus far, I don't think anyone's been sued. I think there was one person who did sue somebody, and they literally did it just, they said they aren't necessarily anti-abortion, but they're doing it because they need it to go to court, basically. Like
yeah, that's what I've heard.
they
Is
need that fight to
the
start.
current law is being upheld, but it's going to be like the real test will come when someone actually carries through with
Yeah.
one of these lawsuits, and then we'll know. But it's like the Texas thinks they're very slick, and it's a very public knowledge in Texas that Texas is very proud of themselves for coming up with this workaround to punish people who aid in abortions. But what's absolutely bonkers to me is that Texas is free living, get your own guns, do your this and that. But then you want to implement a literal like North Korea style regimen of paddling on your neighbors and suing them. I'm sorry, but those two things do not exist in the same realm.
Well, and the big part of the citizen enforcement, the whole citizen cop thing is that, and the reason they explicitly ban state officials is because they're trying to avoid, because when it's the citizen suing the other citizen, it becomes a civil case. So they're trying to
Right.
avoid basically any state officials at any level of law enforcement or government, whatever it may be, of being plaintiffs in these lawsuits, basically. They're trying to take the accountability away from the state and put it on the citizens so that the state does not have to answer for it.
That's crazy. I mean, imagine, on like fighting crimes and they were just like, you guys worry about it. Like,
Yeah.
you tell us. I mean, we can't figure out a way to enforce it. So you
It's
guys just
also-
tattle on each other.
Like the reason that this is obviously such a big deal is, and I'm sure we can all see this right away, is that if for some reason, once something goes through the court system, it does become precedent, and precedent can be used, obviously, not obviously, but precedent can be used in all future cases. So it essentially becomes a form of law. Like we have precedent law in this country. So can you imagine if we exist in a country where there is precedent for citizens to sue citizens over things that they don't agree on? Because
Yeah.
that's what abortion is coming down to, right? So
Right.
well, I can sue people because I don't like, really this opens it up to, well, I can sue this person because they have this flag in front of their house, or they're this religion, or they whatever, they said this and that, like, or they're gay. Like this opens up this whole floodgates of like, well, I don't agree with it, so I'm going to sue you.
Yeah. The
Republicans are always
precedent.
saying like, if you don't like America, you can leave, and if you don't like my opinion, you can kiss this. I mean, it's like, but yet they want to use the law like this to to push their agenda on other people's bodies. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So, like, I just want to point out that that's my favorite argument, because if you don't like it, you can leave. Oh, so you do believe in immigration to other countries if you don't like the current country you're in. Interesting.
Immigration, huh? Okay, we're coming up on time, so I'm gonna rush through the end of this real quick. So we've been talking a lot about anti-abortion, so I wanted to look at some things that were pro-choice that have happened in recent time. So New Mexico, they repealed its pre-Roe abortion ban. California passed a resolution in April or urging the federal government to report reproductive rights such as the fundamental right to an abortion and access to comprehensive reproductive health care, including the services provided by Planned Parenthood health centers. Hawaii enacted a law to allow advanced practice nurses to provide abortion care, which will expand access to abortion by allowing additional qualified providers to provide care. That's kind of the opposite of what we saw back in the day, where they were trying to take that the practice away from midwives and whatnot and give it to the doctors. Whereas now they're like, no, like let's expand it to qualified professionals. Um, which Virginia is fascinating actually for being a southern state. They enacted a bill in March of 2021 that removes a prohibition on abortion coverage in health insurance plans through Virginia's insurance marketplace. Um,
Virginia is actually has been going liberal for the last about 5 to 10 years.
mhm.
They've voted for the liberal president candidate, I think, in the last 3 or 4 elections.
Interesting. Wow. Washington State, Washington enacted a law in April 2020 that requires any student health plan that covers maternity services to also cover abortion care. This law builds on the state's requirement that any state-regulated healthcare plan that covers maternity services weird. I don't know why it repeats that. Um, Colorado, in May, Colorado enacted a law that eases restrictions for abortion care in cases of rape or incest that is covered by public funds. It removes requirements that these abortion services must be performed by physicians and only in certain facilities, allowing a wider number of providers such as nurse practitioners and physician assistants who are licensed and acting within their scope of practice to provide medically necessary abortion care. Connecticut, the last one. Connecticut, the governor signed a bill in May of 2021 that prevents deceptive practices by crisis pregnancy centers. And this article says there are anti-choice fake clinics that do not provide comprehensive reproductive health care and that frequently attempt to prevent people from accessing abortion care. These
I
centers
didn't know about
often
that.
provide misleading information about abortion, such as claims that they provide abortion reversals, which are
Oh
medically
my gosh.
impossible. And so
Wow.
they basically just stop these fake clinics from misleading these poor women who are going in to make these like the hardest decision of their life.
That's terrible. Wow. Let me ask you guys, this is a really serious question. This might be the most serious question I've ever asked you guys. Do you guys think this is kind of going back to the turnaway study where women were turned away at certain stages and how certain states have laws based on viability. Do you think there's any reason that an abortion should be denied if a woman wants to get one? I mean, is there any more, any reason that a woman's decision shouldn't be final on her own body, that there should be some kind of limitation?
Um, oh boy.
I know that's a big one, and I'm not trying to question or whatever. The reason I asked was in researching this, I definitely had issues with late term abortions.
Yeah.
Watching the diagrams of how they do thing, it's pretty awful. And yet I remembered a friend of mine saying, who was a man, who's saying that he hated abortions, but he knew that it had to be a decision, and that it would bother him knowing that a baby of his was aborted, but he would definitely let her decide that because it's her body and it was her choice, and it didn't matter essentially what he thought. So I go back and forth on that, and I wonder where you guys fall in that.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that sentiment. I think when you get to a certain point in pregnancy, unless there is something wrong or whatever it is, then it's like, it's kind of like, hey, you're expected to carry this out. And so, like, I
Mhm.
do understand and I do empathize with the struggle of accepting late-term abortions. However, for me, just like your friend Curtis, regardless of what I think or how I feel about it, I will always ultimately say that it is the woman's choice. Um, like what my thoughts are do not matter.
Kara, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, Curtis, I'm kind of with you in the sense that obviously it's very difficult to wrap your mind around a late term abortion because we've seen babies delivered at 8 months and 9 months and all those things. And um, I guess I am like Dalen, I'm with you that women should be able to decide. I can understand the validity and reasoning for someone saying like, look, if you hit 7.5 months or 8 months, then we're going to have to put a little bit more restrictions on this in terms of like, you do need to be in danger or the baby needs to have some type of, deformity that would make their lives just really miserable.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I could understand the logic and the reasoning behind that. But I do just get like uncomfortable with, I guess, policing women's babies. But then there's also the argument that like, people that are pro-choice bring up, and I get where they're coming from, is that, if someone's murdered and they're pregnant or they're far along in their pregnancy, a lot of times it's considered like a double murder. So
Right.
I get where all of these like nuances come into play, but at the end of the day, I think it should always be between a woman and her doctor.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. I mean, and again, hopefully neither of you were shocked by that question because I was not trying to be like a
I
gotcha
think it's
thing,
important.
but I do feel like one of the reasons that people don't find common ground on this is on the pro-life side, they only see the extreme cases, of abortion late term, and they can't get past that. And then on the um, pro-abortion side or pro-choice side, um, they only see bodily autonomy and the government telling them something that they don't want to have. And I feel like somewhere in the middle there, they need to see each other. And I do happen to agree that I think it does have to come down to a woman's decision ultimately with her own baby. But it does get so much tougher when it is at past that certain point where it is very likely to have been a child.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's not easy, and I think that people who are on the pro life side, or the anti-abortion side, I think they need to understand that it's not easy on anyone
Mm-hmm.
who fight for abortion rights. They don't like it. They don't like that maybe that part of it exists, but they also think that taking that choice away from the woman who created it is wrong.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, and on that, we're gonna call it a wrap for part 2 of abortion and Roe v. Wade, the conservative white whale. Yeah, that was a heavy series. That was a lot. And I think before we wrap, I want to say that I think consistently through this entire show, the social discord, um, we've been very honest, I think, and open about our opinions on things and our stances. But I think with that, we've been very, very true to facts and very true to history and very true to, I mean, just the honest truth of things. And so, if you listen to this whole series, I hope you were able to recognize that we let you know what we think, but we let you know what is. We do our best to just keep it straightforward and honest and fair. And I know this one, like we say, people don't talk about it. Kids don't learn about it the way they should because it is so controversial. So I hope listening through this, you got an idea of what the background really is, and maybe it changed the way you think. Maybe it gave you new perspective. Maybe it just, confirmed deeper what you already thought. But either way, I hope it gave you more information to think about. So with that, yeah, I'm just going to call it a wrap. That was a long one. So, yeah, we'll talk to you all in the next episode. Bye, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Social Discord, part of the Podcast Without Borders Network. You can get a hold of us by sending us an email at pwbnetwork@gmail.com. You can also check out our website at podcastwithoutborders.com. Thanks for listening.